The following was recorded live at Conference21, May 21st to 23rd, 2021.
All right, everybody. Well, my name is Steve Fredlund. I am the Chief Catalyst of Vibrant Community Consulting. And today what I want to do is I want to share a perspective on how we can view our leadership kind of from a different way, really to help us achieve breakthrough, but it requires a paradigm shift a little bit in terms of how we do things. It's a way that our leadership can more naturally engage with people. That is one of the things everybody wants, right? We want more engagement. And so this is a way to view your leadership through the lens of community, which will actually allow more natural engagement. And as this engagement happens, it creates more ownership. As that ownership happens, it creates movement and momentum. And once we get that movement and momentum, that's when we can achieve breakthrough. So ultimately, this is about how do we achieve breakthrough by changing a little bit the lens by which we look at our leadership. So I've got the PowerPoint up right now. I'm going to share some slides. And when I do that, because I'm on a single screen, I can't see the actual chat. So I will try to toggle back and forth once in a while, but it might be a little while before I actually see your chat. So I apologize for that. But you can throw stuff out there. And when I see that, I will address it. Otherwise, we can just, we'll have time at the end to do questions and take comments and that sort of thing. So let's start as we think about this leadership lens that we're going to look through to create engagement more naturally. The first thing I think we need to think about is what do we know about our own personal engagement? When are we engaged? When are we not engaged for ourselves? And one thing that we know is we know that the wrong situation crushes our engagement. And an example of this is I worked for, close to 30 years in the corporate world. The last 7 or 8 years for a global Fortune 500 company. And it was great. Had some really good things. I was leading. I'd started this new area called workforce analytics. Got promoted. We went global, and now I was asked to serve on this global team. Still located here in Minnesota in the U.S., but it was a global team. Very excited, right? I was super engaged. The work was super intriguing. Strategic workforce planning. Absolutely loved it. Loved the people and the team that I was going to be with. But what happened is they put us into a shared space, this open office environment. This is not a picture of my actual space, but it's something like that. Now, I'm an actuary. I'm an analytic by trade. So I like to be focused. I like my spreadsheets. I like to have minimal outside noise. I want to focus on some things. And so they put us in this shared office space, and it was a disaster for me. The idea behind it is they wanted it to be like this entrepreneurial startup sort of feel, and I get it. But it was horrible for me. Just to give you an example, and again, all of these people I really enjoyed, the work I enjoyed, but the environment, the situation just crushed me. And so one of the folks, he was kind of our sales type of guy. He would walk around most of the day with a headset on, doing sales calls. So he'd be talking all day, walking around this, maybe 20 foot by 20 foot space that we all shared. And he would have a tennis ball. And he would throw the tennis ball against the floor. Then it would bounce off the wall. Then he would catch it as he's talking. So he's walking around this office and he's like throwing floor, wall, catch, floor, wall, catch, floor, wall, catch. Well, for an introvert, somebody who needs to focus, that's already an amazing distraction. But you layer onto that, we had somebody who was more on the administrative side of things. And she would be standing up at her cube on the headset, doing administrative things, but she was learning German throughout the day. So in her headset, she was learning German. So she would sit there and speak German words, kind of mimicking what it told her to speak. So she's going with all this German words there. And part of that is because we work for a German company, and so she was trying to learn the German language. So I've got the floor, wall, catch, tennis ball, talking. I've got the German going on over here. And then our boss was a huge fan of opera music. And he had an actual record player in the office, and he would play opera music during the day. I'm not kidding. And it was just chaos. Now, some of you are like, man, that sounds awesome. And I think for them, they loved it. A lot of other people loved it. We had a cappuccino machine in our office, and people would come from everywhere and do the cappuccino machine. And I'm just like, what is going on? And my point behind this is that I loved the job. I loved the people. I loved the work. I loved all of it. but it was the wrong situation. And what happened is my engagement was just crushed. I could barely get out of the car. I could barely come into work. I tried to start skewing my hours. I tried to go work in other places. I just lost engagement in my job and the company, even though the rest of it was good. So one thing that we know about our own engagement is that when we are in the wrong situation, it is absolutely crushed. Another thing that we know about our engagement is that when we are in the right situation, our engagement increases, right? When we are surrounded by the right people, we get excited. We are on board. We are ready to go. And an example I'll use is I started a podcast 5-6 years ago for recreational poker players called RecPoker. And I was doing it myself, and it was really fun. And pretty soon I started surrounding myself with other people who were passionate about this, who were very positive people who wanted to build a community out of this thing. And I tell you what, my engagement's never been higher. It's so fun because I'm surrounded with the right people. We've created the right situation. So just as much as the wrong situation crushes our own personal engagement, when we are in the right situation, we reach new levels of engagement. So we know that about ourselves, so we have to assume that that is probably true for others. So let's think about engagement a little bit from the perspective of a business. Now, maybe you are a small business owner, maybe you're a leader, maybe you're involved in a nonprofit, maybe you lead a hobby group, a chamber, whatever it might be. This applies to all of it. We know that from the perspective of an engagement or from a business or from an organization, that engagement is that holy grail, right? Everybody wants more and more engagement. And this is important because all of the studies have shown how important this is. When you look through the lens of a business, when you have higher engagement, Gallup says that you have 17% higher productivity. Gallup also shows that you have a 41% reduction in absenteeism when you have a highly engaged workforce. Sales are increased by 20% when there's high engagements, according to entrepreneur.com. There's 21% greater profitability. There's 10% increase in customer ratings. These are all things that are highly correlated and I believe also caused by higher engagement. It is the holy grail of business. So everybody is trying to get more and more engagement. But here's the problem. 70% of U.S. workers are considered disengaged. They're not engaged. So we have only 30% of our workforce considered engaged, and that engagement leads to greater business results. So everybody is scrambling, trying to figure out how do we increase engagement? So businesses are desperate for it. And another thing that we know is that engagement is not a natural outcome of business. So as people are naturally carrying out business, as they're figuring out strategic plans, as they're doing all of these things, looking at finances, balance sheet, asset management, all of these pieces, engagement is not organically built into that sort of business. We're driving sales, we're developing products, we're improving operations, we're managing our finances. So engagement becomes this add-on sort of program. And so businesses, because it's not organic and because they need engagement, they are spending tons of money trying to figure out how do we engage our employees or our vendors or our clients or our stakeholders or our partners, all of those people. And so they spend all of this money training managers, introducing programs, developing employee engagement surveys and analytics programs. They're hiring consultants. They're hiring staff. I recently looked at Indeed.com. There are 84,000 employee engagement related jobs on that website. Everybody wants people that can give them the magic bullet, give them the holy grail of figuring out how do we engage our employees. But it's not a natural part of how business is done. And so it's this add-on sort of program. Another thing that we know is that engagement is a natural outcome of authentic communities. So when you are building a community, when you are building a movement, when you are building these sorts of things, engagement can't be an add-on. Engagement ends up being central to these things. Building authentic community requires authentic engagement. So it's different than a business in that way. Businesses are focused on producing and selling. Community is focused on building relationships, building engagement, building movement, building momentum, that sort of thing. It can't be an add-on. You're never going to start an authentic community if you treat engagement and you treat relationships as an add-on. So building community focuses on the people involved. It doesn't start with what can be sold, what can be made, how things can be produced, how to automate things. It starts with people. It starts with relationship. It starts with that authentic community, and it leads to engagement. Because when you start with people and when you focus on engagement, that builds ownership. And deep ownership naturally results in this we sort of mentality. And one example of this, you'll see a lot of pictures. You're like, what are all these pictures? All right, these are pictures related to a nonprofit that I actually started back in 2009. It was called Our Response. And it was really a response to global poverty, disease, and suffering. And we partnered with an organization to work in northern Rwanda in Central Africa. And so what happened is we started doing this stuff, and pretty soon I started hearing people say things like, you know what we should do? Hey, you know what we should do? And that is always the critical moment when I know that we have arrived at creating a movement, at creating engagement, at creating ownership. When we start hearing people say, you know what we should do? Here's what we should do. Like, yes, yes. When I get that email, when I get that voicemail, when I have that conversation, when people say the word we, I'm like, I know we have arrived. And so I put these things up here because these are all parts of that movement of Our Response, that nonprofit that we did, but that I didn't have anything to do with. I started it. I was the catalyst. I managed it. I was the executive director. But these are things that came right out of people saying, you know what we should do? And so the movement that we had, the impact that we had, I apologize for that. The impact we had, all of that stuff was based on creating a movement. And that was based on creating this we sort of mentality of people owning it, that sort of thing. So we did, we had concerts. We were doing a lot of work with clean water in Rwanda. And so somebody said, you know what we should do? We should go to the schools and talk to the fifth graders. So that's what we did. We would go to the schools, and I didn't even do some of those. And people would talk to each of the fifth grade classes, and then we'd have them go on a 2-mile walk carrying jugs of water to understand what their the kids at their age are doing in Africa. So we had all of these, we had hundreds of women that were sewing dresses and a few men as well sewing dresses that we brought over there because it was somebody else's idea. Somebody made a quilt and we raffled it off, made a lot of money, and then we brought that quilt over to Africa. We created medical kits that we gave them. So all kinds of stuff that we did. But my point is that that engagement, that momentum, that impact that we had was all a result of the fact that engagement is a central part of building an authentic community, building an authentic movement. So while business does not have that integrated naturally in, building authentic community does have that built naturally in. And one thing that we know as well, and let me just do a quick toggle and see if there's anything in the chat. Anything I see, some people have joined the room. Welcome, you guys. In case you're wondering, I'm doing a little toggle back and forth. So I have a single screen. So as I share screen, I can't see your chat, but throw some chats, throw some questions out there, and we'll talk about those as we get through. Okay, so we've covered some ground. So businesses need engagement desperately, but it's not a natural part of building a business. Building an authentic community does have engagement as a central part of it. And another thing that we know is we know that people naturally flow toward community. It's what we do. Engagement becomes this great symptom of a vibrant community, but the real draw into community is a sense of belonging. We all want to feel valued. We all want to feel like we belong. We all want to feel like we are an important part of something bigger. The author of Belong, Radha Agrawal, said that belonging is the opposite of loneliness. It's a feeling of home. It's a feeling of I can exhale here and fully be myself with no judgment and no insecurity. That is what we all want, right? Ultimately, we want to feel like we belong. We know that we're different, but we want to be a part of something bigger, something that we feel like we are a natural part of belonging in. Forbes magazine wrote that belonging is a fundamental part of being human. It's actually hardwired into our brains. And I loved this. They were citing some MIT studies done about the human brain that found that we crave interactions with other people in the same region of our brains where we crave food. Oh, I found that earth-shattering, especially in light of what's going on here during the pandemic. It's been so hard to get together with people, right? And I'm an introvert, and I found myself craving people. I can't imagine what life is like for you extroverts or people that just love getting together and the hugs and the handshakes and the networking meetings. It's got to be just a disaster because you crave it, like you crave food. It's what happens in our brains. And another study showed that social exclusion, we experience that in the same region of our brain where we experience physical pain. So in our brain, when we hurt our arm or hurt our leg, that happens in the same place as when we feel socially excluded. And when we are starving for food, when we are craving Oreos or nachos or whatever it might be, that craving happens in the same part of our brain as when we crave that belonging, when we crave to be part of something else. And so I think that's super fascinating to me. And so we want to belong. And so we are looking for those communities that can give it to us. It's why we love sports, right? It's why we go to sports and we cheer on our team. Like, I don't know why I chose the Vikings or the Twins or any Minnesota team other than I live here. But we want to belong. We want to cheer together, right? We want those moments of unity. We want to feel like we're part of something bigger. We crave it. And this is true of your current clients. It's true of your current vendors. It's true of your partners. It's true of your staff. And it's also true of your potential clients and vendors and staff, right? Think of them as people. Don't think of them as vendors and staff. Think of them as people that want to belong. They're craving to belong. They want to be part of something bigger. They want to be in an authentic community. And if you can figure out a way to provide that in your business, in your nonprofit, in your hobby, in your group of whatever it is, if you can figure out a way to do that, they are going to crave that. They are going to start to engage with it. They are going to start to then own it. They're going to start to hear the word "we" coming out of their mouth, and you're going to start creating movement. You're going to start creating momentum. People are searching out communities where they can truly belong. And when they find that, they start to engage and they start to be positive contributors and they start to be champions. They start to be your sales force for that. So let's consider all of the stuff that we've covered, all the ground that we've covered. Let's consider it in the context of our leadership. The most successful leaders build engagement by building effective, vibrant community where people can belong. All of the stuff we talked about, this idea of building community, this is what the best leaders do. As I was sort of fascinated by this idea of using community building to build engagement, I started researching what the most effective leaders have as attributes and what the most effective companies have in their leadership. We see this. It's happening in Apple, Google, Harley Davidson with their Harley Owners Group. It's happening at Nordstrom. They are so focused on building community. Now, some of that, social media, they try to build Facebook communities, but these companies are saying, no, it's deeper than that. It's getting people to engage with them in a way where they feel like they belong, like they matter, like they are an important part of something bigger than themselves. Businesses that are booming have figured this thing out. Inc. magazine did a study of 300,000 leaders, and they found their top 10 traits for success. Many of them pointed at engagement and community. I know for myself, I've been building communities for 30 years. I've been starting communities inside Fortune 500 companies. I've started several nonprofits. I've started a few podcasts. I've started membership groups. I've started small businesses. I've also worked with a ton of other people in a coaching and consulting role to help them grow or to help them become more effective. I work with cities, nonprofits, associations, chambers of commerce, school district, foundations, all of those folks. And what I have found is that the most critical common element for their growth is when they can figure out a way to allow people to feel like they belonged, that to allow people to create a path where people can engage, where they can create ownership, and that ownership then creates momentum, and that momentum ultimately creates breakthrough because there's critical mass. What they figured out is that people need to engage on a personal level, that people need to feel like they belong, that they're part of something, that they're not being used by you to accomplish your vision, but they are part of your vision, that they are part of that, and they're an important part of that, that they matter, and that they belong, that they're valued. All of these places, the ones that have figured it out are the ones that are booming. The ones that haven't figured it out are still plateauing, or they're going through some very negative, difficult times. And this is even true in COVID times. What people have found is that because people are craving interaction even more, when businesses figure out during COVID, how do we get creative? How do we help people feel like they belong? How do we create a sense of community, even in this bleak time? Those are the ones that have reinvented themselves and are managing to grow even during this difficult time. And I'm not trying to downplay the impact of COVID. Some businesses are just crushed. I'm a business coach. There's not a lot some businesses can do. But the ones that have figured out how to pivot and grow, often that pivot happens in the way of engagement and community building. So businesses are growing and thriving when they are led more like a community builder than a business. And I find that fascinating. It's working all over. Well, let me touch on that too. So this is all kind of part of an overall construct. As I work with businesses, I work with nonprofits, I work with cities, and say, all right, what you need to do is build a community. These are the elements of building community. This is how you build a community. And I try to encourage people, build your business on these same principles, and you're going to see some real breakthrough things. You need to have a clear and compelling vision. Don't gloss over that. Don't just say, well, we got a vision statement. It's 70 words long and it's around here somewhere. You need a clear vision. You need a compelling vision to get people fired up, to give them something that they can own. If it's not very compelling, people don't want to own it. Then you need strategies, but not just strategies that are effective. You need effective strategies that are aligned to that vision. And that's more difficult than you realize. It's tough to really get your strategies aligned to the vision, but you need to do it. And then you need to surround yourself with the right people. Whatever the right people is for you that's aligned with your vision and strategies. I did a TED Talk called The Right Peeps in Your Jeep. You got to get the right peeps in your Jeep. You have to do that. You have to create ownership. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. This is really the heart of today's message, is how do you build engagement that ultimately leads to ownership? When you have ownership, man, the world is yours. When people truly own your vision like it's their vision, man, that is fantastic. You need to create a culture of authenticity. And what I mean by this is, I know it's sort of the authentic leaders, kind of the buzzword thing, and that's all important. What I mean by this is you need to have a culture in your organization where people are so much in ownership of the vision, of the strategy, of the direction, that they're passionate about this thing, that they are also then free to say, I think we're wavering from this. I think this strategy or this decision is not lined up with our vision. That, to me, is an authentic culture, when people have the freedom to do that. We probably all know leaders that can't be challenged. You know, it's their way or the highway. They haven't created that culture where people can say, boy, I think we need to go a different direction. And so what happens is they get 1, 2, 5 degrees off course. And because they don't have the culture of authenticity, nobody's course correcting. And so they go 5 years and pretty soon they're way away from the vision. And I think that happens. So a culture of authenticity, collaboration is huge. And all of this is wrapped around being intentional. This stuff doesn't just happen. You can't just say, oh, I wish we had an authentic community. If you build it, they will come, right? This takes intentionality. And the stuff that we're talking about with engagement and ownership is no different. So the most successful leaders are building engagement by building powerful, vibrant, effective communities. These are the key things. And today we're really talking about ultimately engagement that leads to ownership. All right. Now, the most important trait for a community building leader is having a collective we mindset. So now we're kind of getting from the hypothetical into what you can do as a leader. So if you're kind of buying into this thing, and I've got a lot of people that have, and it's working great for them. But once you say, all right, I want to be a community building leader, that's the kind of business leader, nonprofit leader that I want to be. The most important thing you can do is develop this collective we mindset. I'm telling you, this is gold. And for some people, it's more natural than others. But stick in here. If this is not your natural bent, if you're kind of an individual I kind of person, stick with it. I've got a trick for you that you can use that can still help you overcome this. But more and more, if you can move from I to we, you're going to see powerful things start to happen in your business or your nonprofit or whatever. One of the greatest insights that I've had from my work in Rwanda is this collective we thing. Probably the best example of this, and there are many of this, when I really stepped back and started challenging my own paradigms, my own mindset, is you see pictures here. We've opened various water sources in Rwanda, and I tell you, if you've never seen a video, go to YouTube and look up, water source opening or something in Africa, and it is unbelievably how exciting this is. So these are some of the different things. The top left corner is one. I believe that was 2011 was the year we did that. I've been there several times. This is one of the things that we were able to fund and be able to participate in. And so these folks that we've been working with for many, many years, we finally were able to get them clean water that was pretty close. So their family members, usually the kids, were walking 2 hours each way to get water from like this dirty, stagnant pond. And I know that sounds cliche, but we were there. We did it with them. 2 hours one way. It's like a 4 or 5 hour round trip. They do that a couple times a day, which means they couldn't be in school. And because it wasn't clean water, they were sick. They were cooking with it. They were drinking it. It was just a bad situation. And so this water source was about 20 minutes down the side of the mountain for this group of people. And so it was only like an hour round trip, right? We just turned on the faucet. They still have to go an hour and walk up and down the side of a mountain, but it was clean water and it was very accessible to them. And it was considered a miracle for them. Unbelievable. But as I met with them, through the translator, I would talk to the residents and say, okay, what is the next thing that you need? All right. We've been able to do some different things, and now clean water is here. What is the next thing we can do to help you? And these are people that were eating once or twice a week, primarily just eating cassava, which was like potatoes, or they would eat sugar cane, a lot of nutritional issues. They had issue with soil erosion. It was tough to grow things, all kinds of issues. They said the next thing that we need is for our friends on the other side of the mountain to get access to clean water. And I was like, who says that? I mean, I'm an American, right? I have everything. I won the lottery with where I was born, and I could still list things that I would want or think I need. And here they are, not eating very well. The kids, 1 in 5 dying at childbirth, AIDS running rampant, saying the next thing that we need is for those people to get clean water. And it challenged my whole idea of I versus we, and it gave me a bigger mindset. And I think that's an extreme case, obviously. But if we can develop that collective we mindset, think about the ownership, think about the friendships, think about the relationships that are built through that sort of mentality. And when we go there, we see how relational they are, how strong they are, how much they love each other, how much they care for each other. And that's not just coincidence. I think these things are tied together because of this collective we mentality. And so I believe the most important trait that you can do as a community building leader, even in the midst of your business, is to develop this sort of collective we mindset. And this can be difficult in our culture, no question. But I think if we can move from individual I to collective we, we're going to see some really cool things happening. And here's the practical thing that you can do, whether this is easy for you or not. This is a pretty tactical thing that you can do. And it's to start using the word we more than the word I. Just that simple twist. Maybe you have to start a dollar jar or something every time you use the word I when you could have used the word we. You got to put in $1 or $5 or something like this. This is so important. And let me tell you why. So Professor Deborah Tannen, I love this quote. She says, "We are always in the process of judging others in terms of their abilities and their intentions toward us. And we base those judgments in large part on the way people talk." In other words, we are always on the lookout for how do people view us? What do they think of us? Do we measure up? Do we belong? Are we important? Are we insignificant? And when we are in a room with a leader who's always referring to I, we naturally are thinking about that. We're naturally thinking about that, and that somehow diminishes our value. It diminishes our sense of belonging. It diminishes our engagement and ultimately diminishes our ownership. But when we are in a room where we have a leader or whoever who's referring to us as we and talking about what we are going to do and talk about what we have done. We, right? All the way home. When we have that, as Deborah Tannen points out, we are kind of looking for that. And whether it's conscious or subconscious, we start to get that idea that we do belong to this movement. We can be part of this and we matter. And as a leader yourself, this is something that you can do. You might not think it matters, but it does. Using the word we instead of the I drives greater results because people are listening to see how they belong to our business, to see if they matter, to see if we view them as a valued member or if simply a means to the end that we have in mind, right? That if I want to accomplish this, I'm going to use you for that end, or are you part of that vision? What's interesting to me beyond this is that research shows that leaders' success arises from their capacity to speak or to be perceived to speak on behalf of the groups whose members they're seeking to influence or to mobilize. So politicians, and all of this has been studied, politicians who use the collective we and us phraseology as they speak to potential followers, that is statistically significant in predicting victory in elections. People can look at this now. It is statistically significant to show that those who use collective we and us expressions have a greater chance of winning the election. Now, maybe there's other things that factor into that. So I can't say that correlation is causation in this case, but I find it very interesting that that is related to success. The Harvard Business Review looked at 5 separate studies that have been done, and they found surprisingly consistent results. They found that individuals who have a lower status in life, whatever you want to say, they've achieved lower status in terms of their job or their income and those things, they overwhelmingly tended to use first-person pronouns like I compared to individuals with higher statuses. And the converse is true. People with a higher status significantly use first-person plural, things like we pronouns relative to those with lower status. So the implication is obvious here, right? There is some connection. We can't connect all the dots, but there's something going on here. People that use the word we tend to increase their status, tend to increase their rank, tend to increase their leadership, tend to increase their influence than those who are talking about I. And you think the converse would be true in some ways, but it's not. The reason is because people, when they hear we, they think, I want to be part of that. I belong. I'm a valued member. I'm not only going to align with them, I'm going to engage with them. And when I engage, that creates ownership in me. I might actually be a promoter for that. When it's just me aligning with somebody, that's where it ends. But when I own it, when I engage with it, when I am part of that movement, when I belong, that's where things really start to happen. All right, so we're getting to the end here. Here's ultimately what I want you to take away from this thing. And then we can do some Q&A. I'll look and see what comments we have. But first of all, the collective we is greater than the individual I. And again, this whole thing started, I shared this at the beginning. The idea here is how do we create breakthrough success in our businesses, in our nonprofits, in our associations, in our foundations, in our cities, in our schools, wherever it might be. And this is about breaking the paradigm. It's about getting a new perspective on your leadership. Rather than thinking of yourself as a business leader, think of yourself as a community building leader. That is my premise here. And what I've seen through all the business coaching, all the things I've been involved with, is that those are the best leaders. Those are the most influential businesses, are the ones that have leaders that start to look at things like a community rather than just a business. And so with that premise, the first thing is that the collective we is greater than the individual I. Mark that down, live that out, and you're going to see great impact. And even think about that from your own perspective. Where do you feel most like you belong? I bet those places are intentionally doing things. They're using language like we. They're talking about our things. They're giving you opportunities to engage at a deeper level. So collective we greater than individual I. The second thing is start to look through the lens of community. As you're thinking about your vision, as you're thinking about your strategies, as you're thinking about staffing, your vendors, your clients, your stakeholders, your partners, all of those folks, start to look at your business, at your nonprofit, at your organization through the lens of community. Think about it as a community, not a business, and see how that changes some of the ways that you make decisions and some of the ways that you communicate. The third thing is intentionally create opportunities for people to belong. Now, with a nonprofit, for us, that meant let's do a concert, but give people an opportunity to pack medical supplies before the concert. So now people are part of it. They're not just showing up to an event. They're part of the movement. Give people an opportunity to sew dresses. Give people an opportunity to donate rain boots, right? Inside the business, this might look very different. Give people an opportunity to have a voice in a call or in a conference or in a decision, whatever that might be. It's going to be unique to you, but think about that. Get creative. How can you create an opportunity for people to not only feel like they're part of it, but to feel like they are a valued part, that they actually belong to something? That's gonna create movement, momentum, and breakthrough. And then the fourth one is that real tactical thing. Just start saying we more often. Just start saying we more often. Find somebody to hold you accountable to that. Look at your emails. Maybe as you're reviewing an email that you're going to send out, just quick look at it. Are there opportunities for you to say we instead of I, or our instead of my? Look for those opportunities. So that is it. The whole goal of this is to get your leadership perspective changed so that you can create more engagement, believing that engagement creates ownership, ownership creates momentum, and momentum creates breakthrough. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll come back and see what you guys got here. Any comments, any questions from anybody? I see a few people that have jumped in there. I don't know if they are still in there. Michael, amazingly relevant to me. I'd love to know more. It is relevant to you. I mean, this is what you do, right? You are a connector. You're a guy who knows a guy. And I think if you look at things through the lens of community, not saying I want to build a network, right? I'm going to build a network because I want to build a network because I want to have all of these contacts. If you look at it from the perspective of we, let's do this together. Let's build a conference. Let's build a movement where we can all be part of this thing. And let's invite other people to be part of this community. I think that sort of approach, that sort of language has more impact than saying, I am building a network and I want you to be part of my network. I think that's a mistake. A lot of like B&I groups, a lot of chambers even make that, be part of the chamber. Well, no, be part of our chamber, be part of what we are doing in this community. And so I think even changing that language a little bit is good. But yeah, Michael, I mean, this is exactly what you do.